D, yes, meeting is being recorded. With small d, democratic oversight and community control. Although we're in Brookline Zoom land for this discussion, the information that we'll hear is applicable throughout Massachusetts. As a public education advocate for more than 20 years, I've seen how all too often federal and state money comes with strings attached, some that bring negative consequences, including using high-stakes standardized test scores to label, shame, and intervene in school districts. So how wonderful it seems that this unprecedented infusion of resources comes with positive strings. And by positive strings, I mean the resources come with the expectation and requirement of community stakeholder input and conversations like this. In other words, democratic oversight. And now I'll pass it over to Jessica Wender-Shubo.
Good evening, and thanks, Lisa. It's a pleasure to stand with you to introduce this evening and to be a part of it together. My name is Jessica Wender-Shubo. I'm a child of the Brookline Public Schools and of Brookline. I'm a teacher at the high school in social studies, and now serving as the president of the Educators Union, Brookline Educators Union. And, you know, in giving us an agenda review, I note that it's been quite a year, as if it didn't have to be said. Brookline educators and administrators, the union, students, parents have been through a lot together in this past year, and through it all, really some of the best of Brookline's really shone through. You know, members of the school and larger community supported one another in remarkable ways, even through the stress of it all. And together we managed added responsibilities at work and home while protecting our own and our community's emotional and physical health and doing our best to keep education afloat. So with COVID-19 receding in our part of the world, in any case, we've learned many lessons about what children, families, and working people need. Tonight, we're going to reflect on those lessons in the tumultuous year and help decide together how to best move forward for the long haul. I love the notion that President Biden has spoken of building back better. This week, I heard him say, build back better world. And so with that, I'm going to review where we're headed. We're going to start out by learning about the opportunities in the federal funding itself. What is there? How can it be used? We're going to hear from just a few educators and students to get our conversation going. And then we're going to listen really to your ideas and priorities as we talk together and then discuss next steps. And with that, I will turn things over to our guest, Megan, who will introduce herself, and she will give us a tutorial of sorts on the federal money to start us.
Thanks, Jess. Good evening, everyone. It's great to be here. My name is Megan Werner. I am a bargaining campaign specialist with the Massachusetts Teachers Association. And I'm going to be talking with you a little bit tonight to share information about some of the most recent federal funding money that has been made available to school districts and to municipalities. So we're going to start with the American Rescue Plan Act. And it is a $1.9 trillion package that was meant to speed the recovery from the health and economic effects of COVID-19. And you may remember that there were several rounds of stimulus monies that the federal government passed during the last year and a half as we've all gone through this. So prior to the American Rescue Plan Act in March of 2020, when we sort of seems so long ago now, but back when everything was first starting to happen with COVID, there was the first round, and that was the Elementary and Secondary Emergency Relief Fund was passed. And that's going to be referred to as ESSER, E-S-S-E-R, and that was the round one of that money. There was also the Higher Education Emergency Relief Fund, or HEERF, H-E-E-R-F, round one. There's going to be a lot of acronyms as we're discussing tonight, and so a lot of an alphabet soup, if you will, of funding. But there was this first round of money, and that was part of the CARES Act. And then in December of that year of 2020, there was a second round of stimulus money. And that came in the form of the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act. And that's that acronym you see here on the slide. So that was sort of round two of the federal stimulus money. And within that legislation, there was money designated to those two funds that I mentioned before, ESSER and HEERF, so for K-12 public education and for public higher ed. And then the most recent round of money, which is what we have here on the slide, the American Rescue Plan Act, and that was passed in March of 2021. And that's round three, if you will, of ESSER and HEERF monies that were made available. So Pat, if you can go to the next slide. I think just to emphasize, it's important to know that the American Rescue Plan Act is the largest ever designation of federal monies for public education. And so we're going to put that in context a little bit as we continue to talk about it. But within the American Rescue Plan Act specifically, there's 4 sources of funding. And there's 2 specific that are dedicated to education, and there's 2 general funds. So if we go from left to right on this slide, you'll see that there's the state government, which we're talking about in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts through the CARES Act, or sorry, not the CARES Act, through the American Rescue Plan Act, which is the most recent piece of legislation. It created a coronavirus state fiscal recovery fund. And that's what you see there at the bottom, $5.3 billion. And that went to the state of Massachusetts. It also created a coronavirus local fiscal recovery fund, and that went to the municipalities within the state. And so you'll see $3.4 billion there at the bottom that went to different communities throughout the Commonwealth. And then, so those are the 2 pots of general funds. And those monies can be used for COVID crisis related costs. And it defines those that it can be used on education and higher education as well. So those are the 2 general funds. And then we have education specific funds. And this is what I mentioned in the previous slide. This is where the ESSER money comes in and the HEERF money for higher education. We're mostly going to focus on the ESSER monies. As I said, there were the 3 rounds of it. So you'll see here in Massachusetts, if you add up all the monies that were designated in round 1, it was $193 million. You add up all the monies in round 2, it was $739 million. And then this most recent round, which is really going to be the focus of most of our discussion tonight, but you have $1.647 billion actually, and then another $183 million to DESE, or the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, the State Department of Education. So I think the main takeaway from this slide, and we'll see it articulated in another way in the next graphic, is that this third round of money is significantly larger than the first 2 rounds of money. Pat, can you go to the next slide? So again, to sort of put this in context, you'll see on the far right of the bar graph, so that's the ESSER 3 monies that we were just talking about. And it is 3 times, that amount is 3 times larger than the typical amount that the Federal Department of Education allocates to states for education funding. So when you think about things like Title I or IDEA money, so for special education funding, those grant programs, allocated grants from the federal government, are typically, you see here, like $40.5 billion, but through the American Rescue Plan Act, it's actually 3 times that amount. So we're talking about like almost $123 billion. So I think this slide really just kind of puts into context the magnitude of what the amounts of money that have been allocated by the federal government. You can move to the next slide, Pat. So specific to Brookline, which is what we're going to focus on this evening, and if there's other guests with us that are from other communities, we're also going to post in the chat a link to a document that you can look up your own community, and it will tell you the amounts of money that that particular municipality and school district received. But specifically focused on Brookline, if we look at the 3 rounds of ESSER money, you can see here what those allocations are. And in total, we're talking about, 5.7, a little over $5.7 million in ESSER funds. And then this bottom number here, so to the community, if you remember back to our chart, that's the local fiscal recovery fund, and that's what's going to the town. And so that's almost, if we round up, it's $43.9 million. And again, allowable uses of that, it can be used for education, can also be used for other coronavirus related costs. If you can go to the next slide. So we've kind of just talked about the pots of money. It's a lot of money. Before we get into how this money can be used, I will say that the you might have a question about how do we actually get this money? And there is an application process. So school districts fill out an application that goes to DESE, to the State Department of Education. It talks about how the money will be used, what it will be used for, but it's not a competitive grant. So it's the amounts of money that we have shown on this slide and that are in the graph that we put in the chat are the actual amounts of money that have been allocated to those particular districts and to Brookline. So you don't have to compete to get the money, but there is a grant process of filling out the application, and the money is based on the Title I formula that the federal government uses. And there's a wide range of how we can use this money. So part of our task tonight, I think, is to think creatively about what the priorities, the values, and the needs of Brookline students, educators, and families are moving forward, and how this money might be able to help meet those needs. So some things it lists here, and I will tell you that these are directly out of suggestions from the Federal Department of Education in some of their guidance, and also in from the state level guidance and other education stakeholder groups that have brainstormed ways about how we might think about spending this money. So to address, unique needs of students, and specifically it does talk about using it to help address low-income students, multiple language learners, students with disabilities, making sure that as we come out of crisis learning, that those students and have more opportunities, more support, and programs that are necessary post-pandemic. Also talks about addressing racial equity issues through anti-racism initiatives, recruiting and retaining more educators of color. We might think about, and this is a strong focus of the recommendations, this third bullet here, addressing student social, emotional, and learning needs through more favorable, smaller class sizes, smaller caseloads, having more staff available to meet the unique and diverse needs of our students. You go to the next slide, Pat. Another thing that a lot of the guidance talks about is using the money to support and stabilize the educator workforce through recruitment, retention. Now, I think during the pandemic, we've observed and seen the stresses and the difficulties it's put on families, it's put on parents, it's put on our educators, and making sure that we have a strong educator workforce going forward post-pandemic is important, and one of the things that is primarily mentioned in a lot of the guidance and recommendations. I think the second bullet also is sort of self-explanatory, and what we know that we've all lived through, the importance in the middle of a health crisis like this, a public health crisis, to have healthy buildings, to have, safe air quality and good working HVAC systems and all the things that our buildings need to make them healthy. And improving technology, expanding it. So we're going to have an opportunity in a little bit to really collectively think about these things and brainstorm ideas for what would be good uses for this money. But this is just some ideas, and we would encourage us to think boldly, to think big, and about what Brookline needs and what your community needs, and what some of those things might be. The next slide, Pat. So I will say, if, some people might be saying, well, isn't this just one-time money? And it's true, but it is one-time money. It's stimulus money, and there were 3 rounds of it. And again, we're sort of focused this evening on the most recent round of the stimulus money, the ESSER 3 money, the third stage of it. But those funds are specifically meant to act as a bridge to sort of economic recovery and coming out of the pandemic, and what the next few years and a longer term plan for school finance, for the health, safety, and success of our districts are going to look like. And so this money really is meant to be a stimulus, to be a bridge to the future. And so there's a 3-year period in which we have to spend this money. Specifically, I will say that, so if we remember, there were the 3 rounds of ESSER money. They have to be used by specific dates. So the ESSER 1 money has to be used by September 30th of 2022. ESSER 2 money has to be used by September 30th of 2023. And ESSER 3 money has to be used by September 30th of 2024. Now, you could spend it anytime within that period of 3 years, but there are those requirements that it has to be spent over those 3 years. So as we're thinking about this money and it being a bridge to economic recovery and to what the future might look like, we also should think about not only what can we do with this money, but other funding opportunities that are going to be available to us. So a couple of years ago, we passed the Student Opportunity Act that will, over the next 6 years, have an estimated increase of almost $1.4 million a year for Brookline in an adjustment to the Chapter 70 funding, which is additional money that can come in and fill in after the American Recovery Act monies are gone. And then we also think we should be thinking collectively together how we might be able to ensure the Fair Share Amendment is enacted in the future, which, if passed, would give an additional or estimated additional $2 billion a year in revenue for schools and for infrastructure transportation. So when we think about all these things together and how they work with each other, it's primarily our focus tonight was to educate ourselves about the federal monies and what's available to communities like Brookline and to the Brookline Public Schools, but also to think broadly for the future, long term, about how using those monies and these other monies that are going to become available to us over the next few years, how we can really work together to be strategic and to plan for what our values are, what our goals are, and how we want to use that money to move together forward in a way to meet those. So that's kind of just a basic overview of what the monies are, what they're available for, different ways you might be able to use them. And if people, as we're going through this, if you've had questions or things you wanted to ask, I would ask you to put those in the chat, and we can try to follow up with more responses to that. But we're also going to have an opportunity in a few minutes to hear from other students and educators in Brookline about some of these issues.
Next slide, I think. All right, just making sure. So if we could stop sharing screen. All right, so we have come to a little bit more of the discussion portion of our program. So we've heard about how much money we have. We've heard about where the money is coming from and how long we have to spend it. We've also heard about things that are kind of coming along the pike to ensure that we've got that we can actually continue to support our students in the way that we develop when with this money. So so we've heard about the money. Now, in order to get us to kind of think about how we want to spend it and what kind of vision we really want to have, I'm really excited to introduce a few speakers. We're going to be hearing from a few educators and students in order to get the conversation started. And I just want to say thank you to everybody who's here as well. I've lived in Brookline for a long time. I've raised my kids here. I loved it so much that I came to teach here, like, 5 years ago or 4 years ago. I couldn't think of a better place to have done all of that than this town. And I'm very, very excited that we're going to get to talk together about how to improve our schools and make them into the schools that all of our kids really deserve, including the three that I'm about to introduce to you. We're going to start with some really extraordinary juniors. I had the privilege of teaching at least one of them, so I can verify that they're pretty sweet. And by sweet, I mean awesome. Let's get down with the lingo, right, guys? I'm going to introduce Yuko Hoshi, Lilia Burton Patel, and Lily Lockwood. They are juniors at Brookline High School, and they are the newly elected presidents of the BHS Asian Pacific American Club. So hello, I'm trying to find you so that I can add a spotlight. You could raise your hands, that way I can find you to pull you up on screen. There's Lily. And sorry, there we go. Last one. Oops. I'm so sorry, folks. There they are. I found them. All right, there we go. So welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to give you the floor.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here and thank you for inviting us. My name is Lilia Burton Patel. I'm here with Yuki Hoshi and Lily Lockwood, my fellow rising seniors and, as mentioned, co-presidents of the Asian Pacific American Club at BHS. As representatives of APAC, we're very grateful for being invited here tonight and would like to share our views on the allocating of new funding. Firstly, I personally would like to add to the conversation surrounding the K-6 World Language Program in Brookline. From a young age, I personally have been taught by my parents about the benefits of learning a second language in early childhood development, as well as the importance of knowing about cultures different from your own in order to seed open-mindedness. It was mentioned earlier tonight that a suggestion for suspending was to address racial equity issues. Much of the hate and microaggressions that we see and fight against as a club stem from a lack of exposure and education, especially in teenagers. If we decrease the exposure to different cultures during 7 years of early childhood, we risk a generation of Brookline middle and high school students with significantly lowered awareness. However, if we're able to boost our early culture and language curriculum with the new resources we've been gifted, we could take a leap forward in creating the more welcoming and inclusive society that Brookline works to be. We believe that the first step in this is to give teachers better support and training to develop and execute a more well-rounded curriculum, and strongly think this should be put as a priority for funding.
For our second topic, I would like to bring us back to the conversation about increasing funding for mental health supports, not only in the high school, but also in K-8 schools as well. We are, as it has been said time and time again, living in unprecedented times, and it has been taking a toll on the mental health of students. I can also imagine that as we return to a somewhat normal schedule in the upcoming year, many students will be needing assistance in readjusting themselves both in and out of school. While the high school's current mental health support, such as the guidance counselors and the social workers, have been a huge help, and I can attest to that personally, I still believe improvements can be made by the administration to show that mental health of students is being made a priority. This could mean expanding the number of social workers and guidance counselors on campus, or a general improved awareness of what can be done to maintain good mental health by both students and staff. I'd also like to emphasize that while it has been made clear to students that these supports are available, there also remains a certain stigma around mental health in our society. And I believe we can begin to reduce that stigma in our community by expanding the current guidance counselor departments, specifically in our middle and elementary schools as well.
Lastly, we are invested in talking about the arts within our district. As someone who has taken both visual arts and performing arts classes and extracurriculars at the high school, I can say that they've played an incredibly important role in the development of my passions and creativity, and I know I'm not alone. Having a healthy outlet for whatever may be happening in a student's life is not only important for their development, but for their mental health, their social life, and development of their identity. If more funding was given to these departments, you increase the amount of reach and influence that they have on students. And that in turn leads to students pursuing these professions and passions, thereby making them more successful later in life. And what is education if not the foundation for later success? Thank you all for taking the time to listen to what we and many others in our community feel.
Thank you so much, ladies. I just kind of want to really do a real quick yay, hooray for you all, because I've gotten to work and see all of you kind of grow up a little bit, and so I'm just very proud of all of you for coming here and letting us all know exactly what it is that you want to see for your education. So thank you so much for advocating for yourselves and for your fellow students. Our next speaker is a Driscoll School middle school math teacher. I'm looking for her right now. She just disappeared. There you are. There you are, Lisa. Hi, Lisa. I was looking to spotlight you, and then you all of a sudden disappeared. But so welcome, Lisa. So you are a middle school math teacher at Driscoll, and I'm going to go ahead and give you the floor.
Thank you so much, and thanks for the opportunity. I'm Lisa Saltani. I live here in Brookline, and I have taught math to 6th and 7th graders at the Driscoll School since 2012. And I've just been given this opportunity to share kind of my own personal thoughts on what middle school in Brookline could be if properly funded and staffed. In Brookline, and at least at Driscoll, we don't have a strong school culture in the middle school. And the absence of this strong culture, teachers tend to do their own things, and that creates a lot of confusion about expectations for our students. And I'm not really talking about behavior and managing student behavior through rules and things like that. I'm talking about creating time and space to build a school ethos, a way to be that marks our classrooms and schools as places of excellence. And oddly, one of the odd benefits of the pandemic is that we now have a culture of safety, and we recognize that we're all sort of in this together, but we really should have the time to be able to build a school culture in more positive ways. So how would we fix this? Well, we would have enough staff in our schools, both teachers, guidance counselors, supports, so that we can start building culture and meeting the needs of students where they are. With sufficient staffing, we could implement an advisory program based on restorative justice practices to support students' social and emotional needs. We could create a student clubs program to broaden the opportunities for students to develop their interests and showcase their talents outside of academics. More staff would allow time for teachers to develop interdisciplinary project-based learning opportunities, and it would give teachers and guidance counselors to simply confer about our students. And perhaps most importantly, at least from my perspective as a general education teacher, is that we could build academic supports both in and outside the special education sphere, so that meeting high expectations is actually a viable ask for all students. Because right now, whether a student is coming from another country, has never been taught prerequisite skills because schooling was interrupted, or because of illness, or maybe mental health kept a student away from school. Right now, middle school students are more or less, and with their teachers, are mostly just kind of left to figure it out in the sort of limited time we have in the classroom. I might make a call home and explain, oh, your student is not learning what they're meant to learn, and then that's kind of the end of the conversation. So apart from, why don't you come to my office hours, I really have nothing concrete to offer. And this is embarrassing, and it's wrong, and it leads students to feel from a pretty young age that they can't be successful in school. And again, this could also be addressed by building that culture of excellence and staffing it in a way so that students can get there. I'll close just by noting that there's nothing groundbreaking in these ideas. These are just kind of typical middle school practices, all of which have been available to middle school students, even at Driscoll in the past, at various times in one form and another. And we just need to make these ideas a priority and staff our schools accordingly, so that we can really build a culture of excellence in middle school. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I have to say, like, middle school is such an important developmental time, and I would love to see that our students are fully supported and raised up as they are entering the as they approach the age to enter the high school. I think it's so very important that we make sure that our students feel supported and feel like they are ready for the life that they are going to one day hopefully be able to achieve. So in terms of being able to help our students be ready, one of the very important skills that they are going to need is exposure and to other cultures and cultural competency. And so I'm really excited to welcome Cecilia Costanzo, a Driscoll Middle School Spanish teacher. Welcome, bienvenidos.
Muchas gracias, Graciela. Muchas gracias, and thank you everybody for having me. My name is Cecilia Costanzo. I am a native Spanish speaker from Argentina and a Spanish teacher with 20 plus years of experience in education in 2 different countries and 15 years of experience teaching in the public schools of Brookline. I'm here to talk about my personal trajectory and also on behalf of my fellow teachers who are having similar struggles as myself. Teaching in Brookline is a great opportunity, but it has become a huge burden. I began as a 0.4 middle school Spanish teacher. My hours increased when the Brookline community voted to have a full language program going from kindergarten to 8th grade. And wow, what a great town. How much they value languages. So excited to work here, I thought. During the time I taught elementary and middle school, my preps for different courses amounted to more than 10. I had a couple of minutes to transition from class to class, running and pushing a heavy cart from one part of the school to another. By the way, I hurt my back after that time. I did not have my own classroom. I did not have a place to store materials. I did not have a desk. I used to work on a coffee table in the teacher's lounge. However, my students were so nice and they were learning a lot, and I love teaching. I love to be in the classroom. But why can't anybody make my job better? Who would be able to help me? Oh, I know. Let's wait, I thought. They don't have enough money or space to make my job easier. And I need to work. I will continue working, hoping things would change. Next assignment, I was asked by the superintendent of the hour to teach middle school in 2 different buildings. I wanted to be part of the different school teams. I wanted to collaborate with other teachers. But one of the comments I received was, oh, I am so sorry that you are a traveling teacher because you don't belong to any school. Now, increasingly, K-8 world language teachers are being assigned so many minutes of class time that no one can work with teams and be part of the school culture. Last June, after the entire department went through the shock of being laid off, and why? Because of the budget, I learned that my hours are going to change again in the near future, and I will have to travel again. The reason now? Budget. In 2014, Brookline designed a district vision that pledged that the school district is committed to acknowledging and celebrating diversity within our community while affirming the importance of our common humanity. Yet, when it comes to our language, a department inherently diverse, we are treated as second-class teachers, filling in time to free up others to have meetings and under pressure to increase instructional minutes, but not our salaries. Our assignments are excessive, unstable, and widely inconsistent. We're expected to change what levels we teach on command and without adequate time to prepare, while always living under the threat of cuts due to shifting enrollments. This makes us feel like workers in a gig economy. As I experienced in my own teaching career at Brookline, many elementary world language teachers have no office or classroom with almost no time to make transitions, causing physical and mental exhaustion. At the middle school level, the subject is considered a core subject, but we are not treated accordingly. Also, we are told that at the middle school level, in the years to come, students will not be able to choose the language they want to learn, but they will be assigned a language for reasons of scheduling, budgetary efficiencies, and austerity. In sum, to meet its vision of honoring diversity and preparing students for a globalized world, elementary world language needs to be staffed sufficiently to give teachers jobs in the district that are stable and with equitable and manageable workloads integrated into the life of one school. We are passionate about our subject, and we are culturally and professionally committed to the education of our students. We want to have the opportunity to do so in an equitable and stable job environment. American students need to have a second language taught by excellent teachers, respected and valued by the school and the community. We want this to be a priority. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Cecilia. I just, you know, my heart breaks a little bit because I know how much joy world language can really bring. I remember my daughters, you know, in middle school when they had the day where they ate French food for one of them, and the other one chose Spanish, and so her day was a Spanish breakfast. I remember that, and I remember that joy. So thank you so much. Another area that I believe that we want to highlight, and that was highlighted in terms of the money is our special education program and our differently abled students. And so in order to really speak to that and the needs of those students, as well as the paraprofessionals who are with those students every day, I am very excited to welcome Leah, and I'm going to do it, Leah. I'm going to do it right this time. Leah Lunowitz, who is, did I do it right? You may have to help me.
Lunjevich.
Lunjevich. I'm so sorry. I try so hard, but please always correct me if I ever mispronounce your name. Leah is one of our wonderful paras in our RISE program at BHS. Welcome, welcome, Leah.
Thank you, Graciela. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here tonight, as well as thank you to everyone here sharing your voice. So I'm Leah Lunjevich, and I've been a paraeducator at Brookline High in the CBC, so the community-based classroom and RISE program for 3 years. My goal tonight is to give you a glimpse into the harsh reality for Brookline's paraeducators and to suggest that there is value in using federal funds to increase respect, equity, and to prioritize paying a living wage to all educators. Many of you may be wondering, what are paraeducators? What do they do? Paraeducators work with the district's most vulnerable students. The para staff is the most racially and ethnically diverse set of educators in the district, fostering a school culture where all students can see themselves reflected and represented in their educators. Despite the complex and essential role we play as educators, we cannot live on the salary we currently earn. Over this past year, many paras risked COVID exposure, returning to in-person work as early as July 2020. We worked in specialized programs where maintaining social distancing proved impossible. We toileted and hand-over-hand fed and prompted students. We seamlessly intertwined the roles of custodian, caregiver, classroom teacher, elective teacher, and nurse as our students and staffing needs frequently fluctuated. We put our health and the health of our families on the back burner for the benefit of our students. That is the job of the paraeducator, to be selfless, fearless, patient, and compassionate every day. To not only educate, but establish genuine rapport with each of our students to ensure we meet their individualized needs, academic, behavioral, social, emotional, medical, and beyond. This is the reality of the paraeducator. Yet to the town of Brookline, my work and worth are valued at $495.80 a week. Paraeducators have been and will continue to be the backbone of Brookline's school system. We have no financial safety net to fall back on in times of crisis and work 1, 2, or even 3 additional jobs. The next step towards increasing equity and representation in the Brookline public schools is right in front of us. The solution to Brookline's long-standing para retention problem is right here. The only way to continue to support the district's highest needs students is to finally begin supporting their educators with an increased wage equal to the cost of living in Suffolk County, $35,000 a year. One job should be enough, and this is in the interest of students as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Leah. Thank you, thank you. Leah, I just want to shout out to Leah. She was actually a para in my classroom for a little while, and so I can definitely speak to her ability to connect with these students and to really provide them some amazing support. I can also say, like, I teach 2 co-taught lab classes, which are the language classes specially designed for language-based students with language-based disabilities. And yet one of those classes doesn't have a para in it because we don't have enough. We currently have 9 para vacancies at OLS alone. And that was just for this school year that we just, that we are now concluding. So our para problem is dire. So you've now heard a little bit of from our students and a little bit from our educators, but there are more voices that need to be in the pot. So we are going to, if we can put the slideshow back on. that's perfect. Thank you. So we are going to be opening up some breakout rooms, and we're going to do some small group discussion because we really do want this to be a discussion. You've heard about some of the things that we want, but it's not just about us, the educators, and it's not just about what the students want. It's also, it's about what the community wants to build together. And so we are going to put you into breakout rooms. We are going to ask you to identify a scribe. Each breakout room will have a facilitator. We're going to have breakouts last for 20 to 25 minutes. We'll give you warnings at the 10-minute, and the 15 minutes, so that folks are aware exactly how much time is left. And then we're going to come back together. And when we come back, I'm going to ask you to throw some highlights, and then we can have a chance to have a little bit more of a discussion and hear from some of the groups, have them share out a little bit about what they spoke about. So next slide, please. So during the discussion, we are going to ask you to focus on these 5 questions. So these are just meant to be guiding questions. So kind of let them take you where they do. And we've put them in the chat for you as well. So these 5 questions are specifically, we want to know, what resources do you think could help improve student learning? And this isn't just money, this is technology, this is bodies in the room, this is air vac systems. What are the resources? More paper and highlighters. What do you think can help improve student learning? Number 2, how could funding, so now we are talking about the money, how could funding help support and stabilize the educator workforce? Specifically, how can we make it so that we don't have 9 para vacancies or 25 kids in a classroom, right? How could funding actually help to support that? What are some of the resources that you think could help improve student and staff physical, social, and emotional health and learning? We are dealing with a lot of staff burnout right now. And so we really we need to make sure that we are taking care of all of our community members, including the educators that are in the building and the families that are in the homes. So number 4, what resources would help promote social and racial justice? I think this one's self-explanatory. And then the last one, what are your priorities? Did we miss any priorities? Or is there something else that we should have on this list that we should all be talking about and discussing with the folks that make the decisions about how the money gets spent? What are your priorities? Let us know. We will be sharing the information that we get with school committee and with some of the town leadership. So let us know, have this full discussion. All right, so I think we're going to go ahead and open up those breakout rooms. And if folks could go ahead and click on the link.
Hi.
These look like all familiar faces.
Do you think this is our breakout room, or do you think more people are coming?
More people might be coming. We'll give it a moment before we get started.
All right, so as folks are coming back in, if folks want to throw some highlights, what are some of the things that you heard, any themes, throw some of those ideas in the chat. And then if there's anybody who would like to present out some of their thoughts or some of the things that they heard, if you would like to speak, if you could go down to the reactions and raise your hand, that way we will be able to call on you. So if you want to throw some stuff in the chat, that would be great. If you would like to share out from your group, that would also be fantastic. We've got a couple of hands raised. Would love to hear from a few of the groups. Got some tons of stuff in there, some good stuff coming in the chat. Heather Pritchard, I'm going to go ahead and call on you first if you want to share out.
So a couple things that came up in our conversation were just the need to pay paraeducators a living wage to help with their retention, and maybe even having a teacher track for our paraeducators. The idea also came up that our students need to see educators and administrators who are representative of them. So we have continued work to do in hiring and retaining educators and administrators who are people of color. And then another big thing that kept coming up were just the countless benefits of having small class sizes. Especially in supporting our students who are coming back from the RLA and will be in buildings next year and maybe experiencing some apprehension around coming back into physical classrooms with their peers.
Thank you so much, Heather. All right, next up, I have Jonathan Norwood.
First, I want to say that I wish we had another 25 minutes because we were having an amazing conversation with town meeting members and educators and school committee members. And it was really wonderful for me to get those different groups, constituencies, whatever the right word is, together and having a great conversation. Some of the highlights, really focusing on the needs of Asian American students was the particular interest of one of our commentators. And we do have a very large Asian American population in this town. So that took up a good bit of our conversation time and was really informative. Early childhood and making sure that we have the resources to properly support the children who are in our early childhood programs, and also looking for ways to expand the affordability and accessibility of the early childhood program. Interest in delving more deeply, taking a deeper dive into transformative and restorative justice issues. For paras, it came up a couple times, a true living wage. So that you don't have to work 2 jobs or even 3 jobs, and then connected with that, partly, not completely, making sure we're focusing as many resources as possible on low-income families in our school system.
All right, thank you so much.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. I've got 3 more. I'm going to cut it off after these next 3 speakers because I think we do want to be able to move on unless I get the thumbs up that we can keep going. I just want to make sure we're good on time. David, then Lilia, and then Anne.
We also had a diverse group of educators who came up with lots of wonderful ideas. So some of the priorities that we came up with are that this should be a bottom-up process and that we should really be listening to teachers in the field and to students as well. We need more clinicians, mental health services. We need more IT services, up-to-date IT, having better technology for the district as a whole. Advisory for middle school students, critical. Mental health support for staff. Staff members don't know about the employee assistance program, the provider that we have in the district, and making people aware of that is critical as well. And this is popping around here. Hold on, my friends. The document is, there we go. This Google document moves. That we should need more investment in multicultural education. Living wage for paraprofessionals, critical. That will provide stability for the system, for teachers and students, and will also increase the diversity of staff. General investment in the middle school program, having more full-time positions. And also not thinking about this money as one-time funds, since other funds will be forthcoming. Really having a vision for the future and thinking of this as money that's going to continue to come in. and working to make all public schools green and healthy, assessing what buildings need and how they can become more efficient, utilizing green energy, solar, and also teaching kids about green energy, involving them in the process. And I will leave it at that.
Thank you, Dave. All right, so now I'm going to go to Lilia.
Thank you. One of the main things that came up in our conversation was specifically the K through 6 and the K through 8 curriculum and how it is extremely influential in the development of our kids here in Brookline. And specifically with world language, of course, which we've also talked about, we're respecting the teachers, giving them the resources and the space and the time that they need. I remember from learning in middle school, and I remember all of the kids feeling like the teachers were just completely overstretched. And that seems like something that a massive improvement can be made on if we have organization and funding and dedication, which we clearly have here. A living wage for all paras, 100% was a very important thing we talked about. And also continuing on the conversation of curriculum, having this curriculum of all subjects being shifted more away from the Eurocentric and white male thing that we are taught about, and the people that are shown to be the role models that we learn about, and what type of history we learn about, and how that really affects how kids see the world, and how kids look at the people around them and the diversity around them. And that specifically memories from these times in middle and elementary school are the memories that we tend to hear about. And I've heard a lot of very, very painful and very influential memories from my friends and from my community that have happened when people were young. And I think that a large way that we can make change in this is by changing the curriculum. That was something that we talked about a lot in our conversation.
Thank you, Lilia. All right, and last but not least, Anne.
Thank you. So a couple of the things that our group talked about, if enrollment is down and we believe it will go back up, say in a year or halfway through the school year, that we do not cut any staff, that we retain our teachers and support staff and see what we can do with more teachers. And especially the first to be let go would probably be teachers of color. So no layoffs. The other thing is look at for the past 5 or 10 years at departments that have been whittled away for whatever reason. Library is one, and it sounds like world language is also part of that. So that would be a concrete way to just start looking about what we could restore.
Thank you so much, Anne. And I think restore is such a good word to kind of end on, because I feel like COVID kind of broke the society that we thought we had, or at least it broke our image of what society was and what learning had to look like. And so now we get a chance to restore it to what it should have been, right? Like that's really kind of what we're talking about here. And it sounds like the conversations that we had were at least a first step in that direction of restoring together. So if we could go to the next slide. And I am going to introduce my good friend, Bob Miller, and he is going to take us the rest of the way.
Thank you, Graciela. So there's a list of next steps up there, and I want to encourage you to make this a beginning, not an ending. To read more, the Mass Teachers Association website is listed there, has lots and lots of information. But please discuss what you've learned. Stay involved. We really need your voices involved. And, this is a tremendous amount of money. And it's important that all of the stakeholders are involved in making this the strongest district that it can be, and the one that so many of us moved here in order to take advantage of. So advocate, read, discuss, host meetings, attend meetings, stay involved, and please don't let this be the end. Let it be the beginning. Think about what you can do and continue to think about what your priorities are. We need to hear from a broad group of people in order to make good decisions here. So watch out for an email coming to you soon to coordinate and advocate. And again, thank you to all of the people who spoke and presented. And most importantly, thank you to everybody who attended. As I said before, the more people that are involved, the better off we'll be. Encourage your neighbors, your friends to get involved. So thank you all and have a great evening.